The night the fire took her home, Devika was curled up beside her mother under a torn woolen shawl. The winter winds howled like dogs outside, but the warmth of her mother's body shielded her. Until it didn't. It started with shouting, loud, angry voices. Then glass shattering. Then flames. She remembered her mother screaming her name, her father's voice yelling something she couldn't understand, and the acrid smell of kerosene soaking the air. By the time the sun rose, Devika was alone on the road, her village reduced to blackened skeletons of houses. A passing army truck stopped. A soldier, young and unsure, helped her up, gave her a biscuit, and drove her to the district orphanage. The orphanage was a cold structure with high walls and lower expectations. Girls and boys were housed separately. Rules were loud, comfort was quiet. Devika didn't speak for weeks. Other children mocked her silence, called her ghost girl. But she didn't mind. She found peace in shadows, especially after meeting Anya, a mute girl who communicated with chalk and eyes full of knowing. Anya never asked questions. She simply offered space to sit, a scarf when Devika cried in the cold, and a stolen mango on the wally. In Anya's silent companionship, Devika found a language deeper than talking. One morning, while hiding from chores, Devika stumbled into the forbidden garden. There, among the weeds, an old man was digging. "You're not supposed to be here," he said without looking up. Then again, "Neither am I." His name was Mutu. Once the gardener, now just a man who refused to leave. Every day, he cooks life from dry soil. He let Devika help. Gave her seeds. Told her stories of gods and ghosts and lost loves. "Everything lost becomes something new," he said once. "Ashes feed the earth." For the first time in months, Devika spoke, "I remember the fire." Years passed. Devika was now 15. The orphanage hadn't changed, but she had. She taught new children how to read, fought for extra blankets, and planted a sunflower beside Anya's gravestone. A flu had taken her away in a single cruel week. One evening, a social worker handed her a letter. It was from an NGO, offering her a scholarship to study horticulture in Delhi. Mutu had written to them in secret. As she packed her small bag, she stood one last time in the garden. The sunflowers danced in the wind, their faces bright and bold. "I'm not just what I lost," she whispered. "I'm what I grow." Delhi was louder than Devika had imagined. The trains screamed. The streets pulsed with traffic. The air was heavy with dust and stories. She held tightly to the slip of paper that said her name, her scholarship ID, and the name of the Horticultural Institute. Her hostel room was bare, a bed, a desk, a window with rusted bars. But to Devika, it felt like space to breathe. She pinned Anya's scarf above her bed. Then she unpacked a pouch of sunflower seeds from the garden. She'd promised Mutu, "Wherever I go, something will grow." Though she was a natural in the soil, Devika struggled with theory. Latin names blurred in her textbooks. Her classmates whispered about the girl who came from the government home. She kept quiet. But her silence was no longer fear, it was focus. On weekends, she volunteered in the institute's public garden. There she met Mira, a professor who noticed her precision and patience with plants. Mira asked, "Where did you learn this?" "From someone who taught me that ashes feed the earth." Mira smiled. "Then you already understand the first law of life, nothing is ever really gone." Ravi was tall, awkward, and always humming. He worked in the greenhouse, cataloging herbs and accidentally knocking things over. They became unlikely friends. He talked enough for both of them. She listened. When she finally spoke, it startled him. "You have a nice voice," he said. "Like the kind that doesn't need to be loud." They spent evenings reporting plants and sharing tea. Ravi didn't ask about her past. He only said, "Whatever happened, you bloomed anyway." One day, Mira handed her a brown envelope. Inside were documents, approval for an exchange program in Japan. "You've been selected," Mira said. "Your project on medicinal plants in post-disaster zones," it stood out. Devika stood frozen. "I didn't apply. I did it for you," Mira said. "You reminded me of myself when I was young. Only stronger." She visited the old orphanage before leaving. The building looked smaller, worn. Mutu had passed on. A boy with bruised knuckles stared at her through the gate. She gave him a packet of seeds. "For the garden," she said. "It's still growing." Japan was precise and gentle. In earthquake-torn villages, Devika worked with elders restoring herbal gardens. She taught children how to nurse a seedling, how soil remembers. Each time she touched the earth, she remembered the fire, but not with fear. With purpose. Years later, she opened her own community greenhouse in India, Ashes Garden, where orphan children walked, studied, and healed. She named every plant after someone she had lost. Onya's corner was wild and bright. She was no longer the ghost girl. She was the gardener of memory. The voice of the silenced. A woman who bloomed from the ashes. It had been 14 years since Devika last saw her village. The invitation came on thick paper. "We are rebuilding what was lost. We invite you to join us for the replanting of the community forest. Bovonpa Revival Trust." She held it for days, her fingers tracing the ink like it might vanish. Mira encouraged her. Rovi said gently, "Maybe it's time." She went alone. Rovi stayed behind to manage Ashes Garden. "But I'll be with you," he said, in the roots. The drive was slow. Trees leaned over the roads like old men whispering. The sky had that dull orange hue of dusk and memory. The village no longer smelled of smoke, but of dust and old iron. The houses were new, concrete, pale, unfamiliar. Only the temple steps remained, cracked but standing. Devika stood before what was once her home. She could still see the shadows, her mother screaming, her father rushing, the fire reaching. But then she blinked, and there was only grass. Quiet. Earth reclaiming ruin. A woman approached with a limp and a gaze like flint. "You are Devika." Devika nodded. "I am Rokma. I found you the morning after the fire, screaming into the ground." Devika remembered nothing of that. "I had no children of my own. I watched from the shadows. I should have done more." Devika's voice, soft but firm, "You survived. That was enough." Beside Rokma was a child, perhaps 8. This is Sanvi. Her parents left last year to find work in the city. Never came back. Devika knelt and offered her a sunflower seed. The village gathered at the edge of what had once been forest, once been battleground. Elders lit incense. Children carried saplings in baskets. Devika was asked to speak. She hadn't prepared anything. But she stepped forward, fingers brushing the soil. "I lost everything here," she began. "But something remained. Something that kept growing inside me. A seed of memory. Of love. Of fire, and the healing after." She planted her tree in silence. The villagers followed. Roots sank where flames once danced. That night, Devika sat on the temple steps, watching stars flicker. Rokma sat beside her. "You've made something beautiful from your loss." "I'm still making it," Devika said. In the morning, she left a patch of seeds on Rokma's porch. When she returned to the city, Rovi was waiting at the greenhouse, dirt on his hands and a small sapling behind his ear. He smiled. "You found peace." "No," Devika said, wrapping her arms around him. "I planted it." The monsoon came early that year. Rain lashed the greenhouse roof while Devika and Rovi sat on the floor sorting seed packets. We need more space, Ravi said, adjusting his crooked glasses. The kids keep outgrowing the garden beds. They are supposed to, Devika smiled. That's the point. Ash's garden had grown from a modest backyard plot into a full educational farm. Dozens of children, many orphaned, some abandoned, a few just lost, lived and learned among the soil. They learned math by counting seeds, language through naming plants, healing by touching the earth. Ravi didn't believe in grand gestures. One evening, after a long day of planting, he handed Devika a small paper packet. She opened it expecting seeds, but found a ring made of twisted copper wire and a tiny carved sunflower. "Marry me," he said, nervously brushing dirt off his sleeves. "Not for ceremonies or papers. Just plant something permanent with me." Devika didn't answer immediately. She touched the ring, then his calloused hand. "I already did," she whispered. Near the entrance of Ash's garden was a stone wall where children carved names, not of those who adopted them, but of those who left marks on their lives. Anya's name was etched in a looping scroll. So was Muthu's. One day, a boy named Yosh stood before it, holding a chisel. "Can I write yours?" he asked Devika. She hesitated. "Why?" "Because you're the first person who ever stayed." She swallowed a lump in her throat. "Then carve it deep. So it lasts." Success didn't mean ease. Funding dried up one season. A land dispute threatened part of the garden. One child ran away. Another died from untreated pneumonia before they reached a hospital. Devika broke down in the greenhouse one night, shaking beside the tomato vines. Ravi found her there. "It's too much," she sobbed. "I thought I could save them." Ravi knelt beside her. "You can't save everyone. But you gave them roots. Even the ones who live will carry you." He pressed her hand to the soil. "And this always remembers." Years later, when Devika was invited to speak at a global summit on healing through horticulture, she brought no slides. No graphs. No polished speech. She brought a pouch of seeds. "I am not a miracle," she said. "I am what happened after. After the fire. After silence. After loss." She told stories, not of governments or institutions, but of children who grew sunflowers in cracks, who laughed in the mud, who named every tree like a sibling. "I built a garden," she said, "not to save the world, but to teach it to grow again." The applause was thunderous. But Devika just returned home, to the dirt, the children, the quiet strength of leaves. And in the deepest corner of the greenhouse, there was always a small patch of wild sunflowers, where the wind whispered the names of those long gone.